In this video, we will have a look at software testing. Okay, so software testing is just something that we do all the time. Every time you put code into the machine, you run it and you check to see whether it's working. So what we need to do is we need to formalize that. So we need to put it into a formal document and we need to document each one of these tests that we would do. If you were doing this for a software, if you were doing software for a company, you would need to do the same thing. You would go through a similar process. You would create your testing documentation, your testing plan, and then either you would carry out the tests or someone else would carry out the tests, depending on the type of test that was being done. Okay, so some terms in relation to software testing. So testing itself, obviously that is just the execution of a program to find its faults. So that's something that we do all the time. Verification is just checking to make sure that the program is correct, that it does what it's supposed to do. Validation, that term is used for the process of finding errors when you actually execute the program in a real environment. And then debugging is just finding the error and correcting it. Okay, so we have gone through all of these different types of things when we have done our code and we have done the testing as well for the code. So types of software tests, we've got white or glass box testing as it's known. So that's normally carried out by the actual programmer, so that would be you normally. And because it's carried out by the programmer, it's someone who's aware of what the program is designed to do and they have access to the source code. So they have access to all of the code and can go in and look at problems that are there. So the test cases are normally written to check any loops that are happening, any case statements, so that's like an elif statement, any if statements or boundaries. So if, for instance, you're only going to accept a number between 0 and 100, you would normally test for that and make sure that it works. So that's glass or white box. The other type of testing is black box testing. So black box testing, another name for it is functional testing. Basically, it's like looking at the source code and you can't actually see it. All you can see is a black cover on it. So it's not available to the person who's doing the testing. So it's usually carried out by someone who has no knowledge of the source code and they can run through the tests that have been given to check whether or not the program operates in the way that the programmer has designed it to. The difference really is with somebody who doesn't know the code, they can put in values that they think maybe are the correct value to put in. Maybe there's not enough information and it gives more feedback to the actual person who is writing the code themselves. Okay, test planning. How do we do it? So all pathways through the code would be tested. Now that's something that you would do anyway to make sure that every element of your program is working. You've got normal data that you would put into your program and you would test it with that data. You've got boundary data. So if you were testing that something had to be between certain limits, that's known as a boundary test. And then you've got exceptional tests. So that's checking to see what your program would do if you put in something wrong. Does it crash? Is it picked up? Is there an error message? So that's that one. So the test plan itself would include all test cases. So the test case is a description of what you're testing. And the test plan has to be updated with the actual results. So you'll see in a minute an example of a test plan. And if there are any changes as a result of unexpected results, then you have to include them in the test plan and then retest after applying any changes, which again is something that we have done as we've gone through the code. You'll maybe find an error, fix it, run it again and see whether or not it works. So these three things: normal is just normal data, so that's the data that you would use in your code. Boundary is testing upper and lower limits. And exceptional or abnormal, the type of data type that might throw something known as an exception, which can be dealt with, but not within this particular unit. So it might throw a problem and crash the code. So here's an example of a test plan. So as you can see, you've got test number and it starts off 1, then 2, and it would just continue 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on all the way down. We've got test scenario. So the scenario here is we're just going to check that a user can log in. Okay, and it's blank below because it's the same test for these two. So the test case, we're checking the system behavior when a valid email and password are entered. And the type of test is a normal test. And below that for number 2, again, we're checking system behavior, but this time when someone enters a wrong email or password. So that would be abnormal data that's been entered. So for each of these, we have to give test data so that the tester knows what to input and also what's going to happen when they do that. So the email address and password are given here for the first one, and the expected result is the user can log in. And then for number 2, email address and password are given, and the expected result would be an error message stating that it's invalid and they can't log in. Okay, so this is a test plan that has been created, but we've got a column here for actual result that has not been filled in. When you actually go through testing the code, what you would do is you would fill in this column. So you would check using this data here, and if it works as the expected results have said, you normally just say as expected. If it doesn't, then you would write down what the actual result was and any other comment that you've got. Also, what happens is you should take a screenshot of the program working at this particular point, because this document is handed back to the coder and it lets them see what has happened when you have been running the tests. So normally a screenshot for each of the different tests that are available. I do have a completed test plan example, which I'm just going to do next. I've got a test plan example that's completed on Canvas, and it has all the screenshots at the end of that actual test plan. So the test plan itself is the one for doing the standard algorithm menu that we done in class. There's also sample code on Canvas for that one. And there's also a complete, as I say, test plan for it too. So the layout of the menu shows us all the paths that we need to test. So we have to check all of the different options within the menu and check and make sure it operates correctly. So when we do each of these, remember we have to do a screenshot to prove that the test results are as we state. So as a reminder, here is an example of the actual menu that's displayed. So we're showing a list, we're finding the highest value, the lowest value, we're counting the number of values under 50, I'm going to add to the list, and option 6 will be exit. So here's the test plan. So we've got our test number. We're running from 1 down to 11. The test scenario is all of the different options that are being tested. So option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, option 6 at the end, and then I've got an option 10 for checking for errors. So test scenario, test number 1. Test case, what we checking? So we're printing the list array of data. The type is normal. What's our test data going in? Well, we just press option 1. Our expected result would be the array would be printed like this, and the actual result would be as expected. So when we say as expected, we just mean it matches. And because I've actually taken this from a completed document, I have here C test 1. Test 1 itself is a screenshot of this operating. So as I said earlier, the full document can be found on Canvas with all the screenshots. And then we've got test number 2. So we're checking option 2. So we want to, the test case is check the max value is displayed. The type of test is a normal test. And the test data is 2 because the option is 2. Our expected result is 90. So looking at the list above, 90 is what we would expect. And the actual result would be as expected. And then again, there is a screenshot on the document in Canvas. Option 3 is the next test. We're going to check the min value is displayed. The test data type is normal. The data that is going to be used is 3. And the expected result is 3 because looking at this array up here, our lowest value is 3. The actual result is as expected, and there is a screenshot of that in the document on Canvas. Option 4 is tested now, so we're counting values under 50. The test type is normal. The test data is 4 because we're using option 4. And the expected result is 4. Now we get that from counting all the values here. So 20, 12, 34 and 3 are under 50. So that's fine. It counts the values and 4 is the correct answer. The actual result is as expected, and there's a screenshot. Option 5, there are a few tests for option 5. Because we're actually putting input into option 5, there are a few things we can check. So we want to check that the value over 100 is not accepted, because in the code we have got error checking where we're not having a value under 0 and we're not having a value over 100. So the test data type would be abnormal, so we're checking to see how it deals with abnormal data. And what I've done is I've stuck in 1, 2, 3 as the test data, and there should be an error message, value entered is out of range, and that is as expected. So it's worked the way it should. The next test is check the value under 0 is not accepted, and so again it's abnormal data, so I'm putting in -5, and again I'm expecting an error message with value entered is out of range shown, and when the test was done, that's what happened. So the actual result was as expected and a screenshot was obtained. Then what we're doing is we're doing boundary checks. So 0 should be accepted and 100 should be accepted. So we're going to check that. So check 0 accepted is the test case. We're checking the boundary. Put in 0 as a test data and it should add it to the list. And the result is as expected. And then we check 100 is accepted. So again, it's boundary. So test data is 100, and the expected result would be it would add 100 to the list. When this was done, it was as expected and a screenshot taken, so that's fine. The last check for option 5 would be check for normal data. So we're checked that 50 is accepted, and that's just normal data. Test data is 50, and the expected result would be that it would add the 50, and the actual result is as expected. So that's fine. Then we come on to test 10, and we have got option 10. So this is just, the test case is just checking that the menu will give you an error message if you put something in other than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. So it's checking how it deals with abnormal data. I'm putting in 10 and we get an error message coming up, incorrect option selected. Our actual results are as expected, so that's what happens. And then there is the screenshot for test 10. And the last one here is test number 11. We're checking option 6 and we're checking we can exit the program. So it's a normal check. The test data is 6 and the expected result would be you leave the program and the message goodbye shown. So the actual result is as expected, that's fine, and we also do a screenshot of that. So this is just all of the testing that you would normally do to check to make sure your program was working for this particular program itself that we done in class for our standard algorithms. So it's checking to make sure it's working, and you do it anyway, but all we're doing is we're writing it out formally. So we're writing it out in a way that is stored, and we can store it and use it just to validate that our program is working as we said it would. We'll have a look in class at the actual complete document. As I say, I have uploaded it to Canvas, and if anybody's got any questions, you can let me know.